Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Business. I'm Kay Miller, also known as Muffler Mama. I've been the #1 salesperson in a male-dominated industry, a successful entrepreneur for over 30 years, and now my mission is to help you build a business and brand nobody else can compete with. If you're ready to break out of the pack and create your own uncopyable advantage, stay tuned. My guests and I are here to help. My guest today is Karen Kelly, founder and CEO of K2 Performance Consulting and the K2 Sales Academy. She's a 25-plus year sales veteran who trains teams to sell smarter, show up human, and close with confidence. I just want to say welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kay. Delighted to be here.
I know you a little through Women Sales Experts, which I recently joined, even though sales is one of the things I do, but you mainly focus on sales. And I want to talk about that. First of all, I'd like you to just fill us in a little bit on your background.
Sure. I don't think I was the child who said I want to be in sales when I grow up. I actually was pre-med my whole life and wanted to be a doctor. And my father was in sales. And long story short, he was winning President's Club World year after year. And my mom got fed up of going on the trips. So lucky for me, I got called to go on my first trip with my dad. And my eyes were open to another side of sales that I'd really never seen. I always thought of it as retail sales. I would go to the stores with him when he had to buy a new suit. And someone would tell me, look great in a suit. And I'm like, no, that's a bad color. So I guess from a young age, I had that perception of slimy, shady used car salesman. And then I went on the trip and I saw how he was rewarded. I saw how his team looked up to him. And I said, the seed was planted. I didn't go into it right then, but my eyes were opened and the seed were planted to sales might be a path for me. From that, it became a path and I actually went into medical device sales. Without sales experience, I started in customer service. Did that for 14 months and then moved into medical devices and software and did that for just over 20 years. And now I work for myself as the founder of K2 Performance Consulting. And when I look back in my own sales journey, having probably been coached, I would say 2 or 3 times for 20 years, really learned the value of investing in myself and not being afraid to pay for my own courses. And so now I am the person to sales teams that I never had myself. So whether that's through training, coaching, I do keynote speaking as well, but just that support system who's done it, who's carried a bag, who's hit the quota, who's sometimes, a lot of the times failed, but figured out a way to move past that failure and learn from it.
Before we started recording, you mentioned that my daughter is a golfer. And that was such a lesson for me, even though I was never an athlete. As I mentioned, I played the French horn. But to watch what that took is so applicable to sales because you make a bad shot. I know you're a golfer too. And you have to just somehow totally release that from your brain. And it's hard to do. You watch the golf pros in the big tournaments, even they get on track, a bad track or a good track. So that resilience and being able to, overuse word, pivot and have that mindset is huge for sales. But you're right. The right kind of sales is not slimy or pushy. You don't want to sell to the wrong person. I've always been in sales where you want them to buy again and again and refer you. And so have you. So you don't want to leave a bad impression.
No, I think when you've been on the receiving end of it, you'll do everything not to repeat that experience. And even now, it's very hard to be a customer because I know too much on the other side. So I'm always looking at it from a, what could they be doing better standpoint versus just taking them for as they are.
I think that's a good point because when people think, oh, I don't know how to sell, what's the right way to sell? There are so many different ways and we're all customers. And so oftentimes, unfortunately, with retail, we have bad examples. One of my best friends is buying a car right now and the old stereotypes, they're still going on. Yeah. So maybe that B2C world is different because it's more of a one-time sale. But when you are in a relationship selling situation, you're helping your clients sell again and again, make bigger sales, all of that. Of course, you don't want to be a slimy, pushy salesperson.
No.
So, one of the things I want to talk to you, I know you're big into mindset. We're going to talk a little bit more about EQ and how you can use that emotional intelligence without softening your closing skills. But you mentioned something that I don't think has come up with any of my guests, and that is fitness, and how during the intro, I mentioned that briefly. Let's talk about how important that is to you. You see other salespeople or whoever. What does that mean to you?
Well, the reason I guess you found the information, I was on another podcast, Paul Watts, and he was looking at the correlation and is there one between sales performance and fitness and health? And for me, I've always been into fitness. I've always been active that I don't really know any other way. But when I can look at, I remember back with the CEO of my former company, and he was just always fit but physically fit, but it translated to who he was as a person, how he showed up, how he was present. And I remember just being a little sales rep and being so busy running around. And I'm like, he's a CEO. He still finds time to go to CrossFit every day, whatever his things were. So he made it a non-negotiable. And I just remember seeing in those times of heightened stress, of uncertainty, I found that unwavering commitment to staying the course for him was because of his fitness routine. And so I guess I became more aware of my fitness and I became more committed to it. But for me, it's just how you show up, like when you think about energy, we have to bring sales is a transfer of enthusiasm. And so if we are not investing in ourselves and really ensuring that our needs are taken care of from a fitness standpoint, from a health standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, how are we able to do that to our prospects, to get curious about what's keeping them up at night when we are not even able to hold our head up because we're lacking nutrition, we're not moving our body. And so it's just been a way of life for me. And I can see what happens. There are very few days that I don't do it. And it's because it's just been so automated and I feel amazing. And I was just saying before we hit record this morning, I didn't want to do it. And it was a very few days that I didn't want to do it, but it was a hard workout and I totally just kicked my own butt. And immediately, like you can't be having a pity party and doing hard stuff in the gym at the same time. So your mind just focuses and the energy focuses on the task at hand. But I think the bigger message is you don't break a promise or a commitment to yourself because you show up every day. And that self-belief and that self-trust translates for me into business. And so when I can do heavy lifting and heavy things and tough things in the gym, I can also make tough decisions, do hiring, do firing, put myself in uncomfortable situations because that environment is not new to me.
I think it definitely transfers. I have been a lifelong worker-outer, but once I get into it, and this morning, I'm kind of getting back into that after being sick. I wake up and I think, oh, should I hit the snooze? And all of a sudden I'm like, no, I'll feel terrible. Like you said, you want to keep your word to yourself. It proves that you're disciplined, that you can keep your word to yourself. And of course, that's a huge deal with customers. I'm curious, did you find that there's any data, however you want to say it, backed proof that fitness correlates to mindset or success?
I remember preparing for the podcast. I can't quote it, but there definitely was. Even just the blood flow, where it's going, your focus, your longevity, your energy. There definitely was evidence to support it is favorable. But then there was other people that say, I've never worked out a day in my life and I've been, closer in President's Club and la, la, la. But I just think it's all about a feeling too. How do you feel when you show up? Because I want to be energetic. I want to be people to gravitate to me. And a lot of that is the energy you give off. And so while it's working out, it's more than that. It's even, do you have a morning ritual? Are you connecting with a higher being, whatever that is? Are you slowing down? Are you setting your intentions for the day? Who do I need to be today? What version of myself, if I have to speak, do I have to pull the confidence lever? If I have to coach, do I pull the curiosity? Like, who am I channeling that I can ensure that my actions stack up to that person? And I think if you're not intentional in the day with that, you're just leaving it up to chance. And you're just saying, well, let's roll the dice and see how the today goes. And I'm just like, no, that's not the way I operate.
I think it's kind of funny that you mentioned your CEO. He found time to work out because that's one of the excuses that I use. Now, you
Yeah.
have two young children.
Yeah.
My daughter's grown, and my time is my own, but I think this is ridiculous when I say I don't have time to work out. And working out gives you more energy. I like that word energy. It reminds me that if you don't love yourself, how do you share love with others? If you don't feel good about yourself, I think it's a game changer. Having said that, as you said, there are many roads to the top of the mountain. Some people don't need that. Some people are fine without it. So if you're listening, you never work out. If that works for you, hey, that's good. But I totally agree with Karen. My mindset is totally different when I work out. So I did this morning and I feel great. You can probably tell. Look at how much energy I have. So I want to talk about mindset, and let's tie in emotional intelligence and how that feeds into being a great salesperson.
Well, I think when you look back, what you were just saying about the golfing, and your daughter's a golfer, and when you look at, I don't know how much golf you watch, but Rory McIlroy, and Lance, when he, I think it was last year, and he was just failing miserably, and he said he was all in his head, and he said he did mindset work, he had a coach, he did meditation, and it shows from a physical capability, those golfers, those pro golfers, the margin of difference is so minute. What allows them to champion is their mindset, and to stay, to even Federer, to reset after each match that hasn't gone well. And so sales is the same. Like, for the most part, people know what to do from a sales fundamentals. There's processes, there's stages, there's exit criteria. For the most part, that's not where they're getting hung up. They're getting up because they're in their head. And this is kind of leads into that 3R system I have. And I can just tie that in a little bit. The first one is...
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
This is a way to unstick deals, or to prevent deals that get stuck in the first place. And so it's a 3R system. The first R is reframe. The second one is reveal. And the third one is reset. Revisit. And so the first one is reframe. It's just, how am I approaching this deal? Like, myself as a salesperson, am I leading with fear, uncertainty, doubt, scarcity? I lost the last one. Am I projecting it? Is my energy low? Am I vibrating on a low frequency that I'm incapable of seeing the right person, the right opportunity in front of me, and I'm just doom as gloom? Because when we approach it from that, we are missing so many things, because we are layering our own bias, our own filters on it that aren't there. And so the first one is just getting your mindset in check, and just saying, like, I always do the reverse of this and say, what if I believe this to go well? How would I need to show up? Because you interrupt the brain and you stop the autopilot, and you're more intentional versus, well, that last one didn't go my way. These guys have no money. They're tire kickers. It's going to be the same thing. You're just projecting and predicting more negativity, more of the same. And so the first one is getting your mindset in check, and really reframing yourself so that you can start seeing things others don't, and not picking up on the obvious signals that everyone else is seeing. This is your differentiator. And then the second one is reveal. And once I've done that, I've kind of shown up with a neutral lens, and I can see things for what they are. How can I reveal? How can I lead with transparency and disarm? And the reason is, this is Matt Dixon and Ted McKenna's work from the Jolt effect. It's 56% of deals end in indecision, and the underlying emotion is fear. And so how can you disarm your audience and just de-risk it, and maybe share some objections, lead with them, be transparent. Hey, this is who we're not for. If you're looking for this, we don't have it. We're probably never going to have it. Because what I realized in my corporate careers, I was always buttoned up, polished. I was the expert. And what I was doing, unbeknownst to myself, was training my prospects to show up the same. So their cards were face down, because my cards were face down. And then I realized, when I could show a little bit of authenticity, a little bit of vulnerability, all of a sudden the stories they were telling were true. The timeline was true. Budget was appearing. And I was like, oh my God, I'm the one that's sabotaging my own deals, because I'm afraid to reveal, because in my world, emotions were weakness. We don't need to show that. And even growing up as 4 girls, emotions are weak. So that I couldn't show my human side, and it was working against me. And so after you reframe, reveal, show up as your human self, then you revisit. And those are back to basics, the fundamentals that are tried and true, and that really haven't changed over time. And I think people now are looking for this shiny object, this magic bullet, the new AI prompt. And it's like, it's you. Like that doesn't exist. So what do you need to do starting with? Are you talking to the right person? Have you got, alignment on problem acknowledgement? What's the impact? Like the basics that people are missing. And because for various reasons, some people after COVID never learned to actually sell, never learned the fundamentals because they were order takers. It was the gravy train was coming in. Now the expectations are to go outbound and they have no idea what to do. And so when you can apply that 3R, starting with your mindset, you start seeing things that others don't. And people say, well, do you have to start with that? And I just think, yeah, because if I were to show you the fundamentals, but you're in your head and you're doubting yourself and you're leading with scarcity, you can't see them. So you have to start reframing and observing how you yourself are showing up.
Well, I have to tie this back to sports and golf. And I think it was the Ryder Cup, but I should know. It was a major tournament where Rory McIlroy he just fell apart.
Yeah.
And it's just unbelievable. Like he said, he's in his head and then he turned it around. I'm so surprised at how many of the players these days have sports psychologists.
Mm-hmm.
They do, because it's so tied into your mental state. And I've heard some of them. I'm always curious to hear. A lot of it's positive. You could do this. You've done it before. So the language that going through your mind, I do agree that projects to them. And it also, you're listening to yourself, of course. So those are really good points. Our whole deal is being uncopyable. Steve and I have written books, done lots of trainings and teaching, and you can't be uncopyable if you're like everyone else. That's what you said. And a story just popped into my mind about Lisa Schneier, who is in our Women's Sales Experts group. And she lost her job and she took a deep breath and she posted on LinkedIn that she lost her job. And instead of painting this rosy picture, she shared that vulnerability. And she said people just opened up to her. So yeah, we're afraid to be ourselves. And yet that's really what works, especially with AI. I'm becoming an AI professional AI spotter.
Yeah.
So I like your 3R velocity system. Acronyms are always great, or RRR, something that you can remember. And again, the how to do it don't really matter if you don't come from the right mindset. Is that different from, I think it is, you're going to explain, emotional intelligence, which I think, again, people are afraid of having that empathy or the soft skill, and because it will keep them from closing. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think that's just a stigmatism. I think it's outdated. And I think that depending on if you're from a kind of that old school leadership and dictator, that yes, it's fear mongering and like, let's drill this into them. And I can say in my 20 years, that was the directives that I received as well. We were not showing emotion. We were not leading with transparency. And it's just so ironic now to think how we still were successful. And it's not that it didn't drive results, but it was just like you didn't feel like you were doing not that you weren't doing the right thing, but you're just like, it didn't matter as much. And I think when you look at sales being the long game, like fulfillment and knowing that you're actually doing something good and doing something that matters, for me becomes more important, where it was kind of the almighty dollar before. And now I'm like, you know what? I actually have to care and it's got to be meaningful. And so I think that people are starting to take notice of that now. And I always say soft skills produce hard results. You get hired for your technical skills, but you get fired for your soft skills. And I don't even like the word soft because it kind of gives the illusion of it's meek and it's weak. But when you look at AI and every email is sounding and looking the same, and when you can share a video or something that you are authentic, and even that reveal, like, hey, we screwed up, but this is how we've got better. This is what we learned as a result of that. Immediately it shows you're human and people start trusting you because they're thinking if she's telling us this now, we haven't even started working with her. Imagine what she's going to do later. Whereas everyone else is giving this fake, we're all this and we can do everything. Nobody wants to get behind that because, again, you look and sound like everyone else. And it's that typical salesperson. But I struggle to show vulnerability for my entire career. Now I'm the pendulum is almost too far. It's like, okay, you need to hold some stuff back a little bit. But I don't know. I just think if I can be more relatable and if I can help somebody with that, why wouldn't I do that? And it's not that I'm still in the quicksand of it all. Whatever that failure was, I've learned from it, and those are the ones that I'm ready to share. But I can tell you, just if I can tell a quick story.
Sure.
I was invited to a college to speak to a group of sales students, and the topic was finding your authentic voice. And I remember telling a little bit about, my sales background, some my wins, my losses, some of the stories. And then at the end of the talk, there was nothing. There was no questions, no engagement. And they were looking at me like, are you done? Did you misunderstand the instructions? And I hadn't moved them at all. And I realized it's because I never allowed myself to get moved. And in that moment, it was the first time I disarmed. I completely disarmed, and I shared the real stories, the ones that I thought I had to hide behind, the ones where I failed, where I was scared, where I showed up with complete imposter syndrome. And that's when they leaned in. And I felt so uncomfortable. My voice was shaking. But it wasn't about me, because I saw by me sharing, it was showing them, these new students going to sales, what it was really like, what they could expect. But they saw this polished girl at the other end, and it's like, this was real. But because I'm sharing this, I'm only now able to show up like this because I went through this. And so as much as I wanted to just return to that buttoned up, polished, safe Karen, I didn't, because I just thought it was so freeing and liberating. Not in the moment, it definitely was uncomfortable, but I just saw that was the only way to help them forward. And from that day on, I never stayed at that level. I had to come down to that real raw, almost embarrassing, but that's how you learn, and that's how they learn. And they were so appreciative of that, like that realness. So I'm like, that's like, anyone that says they don't fail, they're lying. And I'm like, this is how I failed in sports. I told them how I hit the wall running my first marathon. I told them how I got kicked out of a physician's office, like all these things. And a lot of the times you don't know what you don't know, but I'll tell you what, I never repeated those mistakes after that time. But you have to be real and authentic. And that for me is our differentiator today. So companies that are afraid that it's going to have a negative impact on their result are the companies that will lose, because they are blending in and everybody wants to feel seen and heard, and people connect with your imperfections, not your perfections.
So I have a funny story that came to mind, and this is not my story, actually. It's one of my early guests, probably nearly 2 years ago. Her name is Lacey Houston. You can look up the episode.
Okay.
And she sells exhibit space. She's a sales leader. And during COVID, she had to have a Zoom meeting with a big prospect. Well, she's a mom too, and one of her kids was little, in diapers. And while she was on the call, her toddler came into the picture, pulled off his diaper somehow, and went number 2 on screen.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? She got the deal.
Yeah.
She said, no one will ever forget that story. Can you imagine how red her face was? It just seems like the worst thing ever that can happen. I have a story. I do a personal story. I make it really short, but when I was in outside sales, I worked with another rep. I live in Seattle. He was almost down to Portland. And I'm bopping down the road. All of a sudden, my car loses power. I was out of gas, and I didn't have a cell phone or anything like that. And I look across, there's a neighborhood just across the way, but in between me and the neighborhood is a cyclone fence, like a chain link fence. And I freaking climbed that fence because there's nothing else I could do besides walk down the freeway.
Yeah.
I told you, words come out of my mouth. The freeway. Guess who told that story more than anyone? Guess who is still telling that story? And the sight gag of me climbing a cyclone fence in my John T. Malloy outfit, if you remember him, Dress for Success. So yes, if you can make fun of yourself and if you can share those details, we're all real. And I think social media, we all know this, but it's still hard to remember that what we see on social media is not reality. I never look at LinkedIn and see people say, oh man, I just lost this big deal. I'm really feeling down. Have you ever seen a
Mhm.
post like that?
Some, but not enough.
Not very much. It's usually about how successful you are. And of course, stories. We all know that you remember stories much more than facts. And that story about Lacey Houston, she'll
Mhm.
go down in history with that story. So
Mhm.
I have a friend of the family. He was hilarious. He's deceased now. He wrote a book and it was called "It Wasn't Funny at the Time." And whenever something bad happens to me, I always think, dang, I'm going to have a great story.
Yeah. Oh, totally. When something bad happens, I'm like, that will be my keynote in like a year or two, but not right now. It's still too fresh, but you know that they happen for a reason. They're there to teach you something, right?
Yeah, they are. And maybe just to remind us that we aren't perfect and nobody is.
Mm.
So we're winding down on time already. You talked about pipelines being stalled. Do
Mhm.
you have any? I mean, I hate to put you on the spot to be so quick about that, but do you have anything that would help us keep in mind when things are getting stuck?
The 3R system definitely is to unstick deals. But if you want to back it up a little bit, I think a lot of, if you're looking at top of funnel, it's that first, why are you reaching out in the first place? And a lot of times leaders are just, it's a numbers game. And it's like, here, do your 100 dials or your 100 emails. And it's like, well, what is the reason you're reaching out? And I'm assuming you're reaching out to the right person in the right industry, but like there has to be a reason versus just for the sake of it. And I think that compelling reason is missing. And I think as a salesperson, when you are genuinely aligned to the industry, like for me, I worked in medical devices and software. So that is something that will always be near and dear to my heart. I know it intimately. So if I'm reaching out to a company, like I know what to look for, I know the challenges, I know what's keeping them up, I know the impact, and I know the questions that they don't know to ask. So I can lead with that kind of information so that it does create a bit of a curiosity gap for them. But I feel a lot of people are just checking a box and it's the wild, wild west out there. They're written by AI. And even to back it up before there, like when you look at a sales process and you look at the various stages, people are just outsourcing all of that to AI. And as a salesperson, you need to understand fundamentally, like, what do I need? What commitment? What is that exit criteria in this stage? Like, why are we even in this stage? And I feel like that real intimacy of the process and the way in which your buyers buy is missing. And they're just looking for prompts. And I'm like, prompts can support you. But once you understand the fundamentals that are guiding your prospects, but the prompts are only the output is only as good as the input. And that's where people, like I had a call yesterday. I said, well, what are you doing? What is the prompt you're inputting for your email? And he said, make this more business, make this sound more business. And I'm like, not really a prompt.
Yeah, and this is all talk about, you said the Wild West. AI is so new to all of us, so we're getting used to learning it. I've been playing around with some things because I create a newsletter based on my podcasts. Well,
Mhm.
I've been working with ChatGPT and it's just gotten worse and worse. So then I tried Gemini. Gemini
Yeah.
seemed to be much better, but it's still AI. I still have to edit. One of our founding principles is moose, and you see the picture of the moose
Yes.
behind us. That's how we describe your ideal prospect. And one of the many factors you have to use as a deciding factor is, do they see value in what you're offering? Like you said,
Mhm.
do they fit? It's okay to say no to a prospect if they're not right. We all know about the 80-20 rule.
Mhm.
Why not find that 20% who you will really click with and they will click with you? And
Mhm.
helps your closing rate, helps things move through the pipeline, helps you develop relationships where you could really deal with their world from their perspective. So I had to throw that in about the moose because it's really resonated with people. And like you said, start from the beginning. If you spray and pray, you've got a big job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have a 3-part webinar coming up in February, and I want you to talk about how people, what it is about and how people can sign up for it.
Yeah. Well, as member of Women Sales Experts, my colleague Ashley Welsh and I are both co-hosting a 3-part webinar. We will have a landing page and I will give it to you for anyone who would like to sign up. You can include in the show notes, but it's the first one is February 10th. It's on storytelling. The second one is the week after, the 17th, making it visual. And the third one on the 24th is lead with connection. And we just looked at where is there friction in the sales process? Where are people getting stuck? And a lot of it is that left brain. When you think about sales as the art and science, and the left brain are tapped, and it's the right brain, or even what you go back to that soft skills, that when you look at the brain, the part of the brain that's responsible for decision making has no concept for language. It's all emotion. And so what we're doing here is storytelling, making it visual. How can you paint a picture? How can you leverage video, camera, storytelling again to make it visual so they can see it and apply it to their own world? And then leading with connection. And I think that's like, for me, that's my core value is connection. And a lot of times, it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel. And so they should just get off the phone with you and be like, God, I liked all three of them, but something about her, she was just different. And sometimes you can't put your finger on it, but that's what connection is. And that's putting the other person at the focus. Like I said before, answering questions they didn't know to ask. Really tailoring it to what would they hope to get out of this? What would they not want to talk about? And a lot of times when we're so inwardly focused and we're maybe newer in sales, because I did this very early in my career for a long time. I was just, what are my key selling messages? What can I do in a discount? And I was just so me focused. But now when I can detach from the outcome and be genuinely curious and focus on the other person, I can see them and they feel seen and heard. And even if it doesn't end in it, I just want a conversation. And that's it. And through that conversation, I'll be able to figure out if the challenge is big enough, if it's frequent enough, if it's worth solving now. And if it's not, I'll be like, look, you know what? Come back in 6 months because, you can use this revenue in other areas that are more imminent in your, opportunity space.
That's so powerful if someone says, I'm not going to sell to the wrong prospect. I'm not just going to sell to everyone. So excellent point. That gives you a lot of points with your customers and prospects and lets them know where you're coming from. You listening have the opportunity to learn from one of the 100 most powerful women in sales in LinkedIn. And I will put those links the link in the show notes along with your website. I assume you're open to LinkedIn connections or followers? What's your LinkedIn?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that goes out every other week, and just, connect with me and let me know that you heard me on your podcast.
Karen, it's been super fun. I think you've given great content for listeners. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Kay. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Business. If you enjoyed it, please follow, rate, and review the show. And be sure to visit beuncopyable.com/K. Always remember, be uncopyable.